Cloud services is exponentially booming, and one local tech firm is in the lead. ClearObject brings the IoT stories of customers to life every day, providing the security, innovation, and dedication to reinvent your business. A good friend who I've got to know over the years leads that group. He's going to be joining us next to talk more about IoT. I was thinking through as I was writing scripts in Gary's absence this morning at about 5 a.m. How I introduced John, and I feel like he's kind of the godfather of IoT a little bit. In the state of Indiana, as a humble guy, he probably would tell me to leave that one alone, but again, I look up to him and his lead for IoT. We shared locally in helping get the IoT lab going up in Fishers, Indiana. We got some of that team here today, and we're working to get that facility opened up. So some exciting things happening in Indiana. Again, leading that charge, leading that innovation with IoT. Excuse me. If you can help me welcome a good friend and again an industry guru, Chief Executive Officer of ClearObject, John McDonald.
Godfather, I will not take that. Kiss the ring. Thank you, Ian. Thanks everybody for listening a little bit. ClearObject is the leading IoT systems integrator in Indiana, and I want to tell you some of the things we want to do with your technology page, and also thank the BIC for their great support as they lead as well. So I frequently give a little bit of a talk which I like to title The New Crossroads, which is trying to explain to all of you and anyone in our state why this is really the new crossroads of the future. If Indiana is the crossroads of America, here we go with the next one. And the way I like to point that out first is to make the observation that the world's biggest hospitality company, Airbnb, owns no hotels. The world's largest retailer, Alibaba, owns no stores. The world's largest distributor of content, Facebook, makes no content. The world's largest broadcaster has no studios, no TV stations, and no broadcast towers. And the world's largest car rental company, Uber, owns no vehicles. What do they own? What they own, in fact, is data. Our entire economy is actually shifting to what I contend, and many contend, is the fourth major shift in how our global economy is organized, which is a completely audacious statement, but let me support it a little bit. The first organizing structure of our economy globally was agrarian, organized farming. You farm, so I can go to the marketplace and buy your farming product, and not everybody has to farm. The next one was the Industrial Revolution. Factories. You go make things and then I'll buy them in stores. The third one, many believe, happened fairly recently. We're a little close into it from a historical perspective, but it's a revolution in how we move things. Shortly after World War II is when we got shipping containers, jet air transport, interstate highway systems, really a way to move things effortlessly around our planet. But the fourth major organizing structure that's happening is a shift towards data, and it's data from all of those things. And that is really what's at the heart of the Internet of Things. People say, well, what are we doing with IoT? Well, we're just making everyday products smarter. No, I can understand that. But why? And the reason is because now those things are sources of data. Let me explain what I mean. There are 33 autonomous vehicle programs underway in America right now. So if you don't think that we're going to get autonomous vehicles, you're mistaken. There are some 5 levels of autonomous vehicles. Level 1 is sort of cruise control. Level 2 is adaptive cruise control, where you can keep the distance between your car and the next one automatically. Level 3 is sort of steering cruise control, where you can set not only the speed, but the car will stay in its lane automatically as you move down the road. That's a level, by the way, that we're trying to skip because people can fall asleep fairly easily at that level. Level 4 is a car that can be pre-programmed to drive from one location to another without driver input and fail safely. So that if there's a road blockage, for instance, the car will pull over and stop and wait for driver input. And level 5 is a vehicle that has no steering wheel. Level 4 autonomous vehicles are in the product roadmap for Ford and General Motors for the 2021 model year. In fact, if you just Google Ford autonomous vehicle 2021, you'll come up with an entire web page where they talk about that's not just in their product roadmap. They intend to mass produce vehicles that can drive from one location to another without driver input under most normal conditions in 2021. And because vehicles only last somewhere between 5 and 8 years, I mean somewhere between 2.5 and 4 years, it will take for half the vehicles on the road to have that technology because they just simply wear out. Which means that most of you in this room, God willing, will be in a autonomous vehicle very, very soon. So what happens when that occurs? Well, the first thing is we need a lot less roads. Because we have to maintain a safe distance between the vehicle that we're in and the car in front of us, we have to have a certain amount of roads. But when you have autonomously driven vehicles, you can run them back to back, which means that you reduce a lot of the drag coefficient, use a lot less energy. You also don't have to run them at 65 miles an hour. You can run them at 200 miles an hour, which means you could travel to Chicago for lunch if you chose and come back. That world, by the way, we start to not need things like Southwest Airlines, because now I can go for lunch in Chicago. Apply that idea to distribution of home goods. This is not a mock-up. It's an actual autonomous UPS vehicle. Can anybody see what's coming out of the top of that? It's a drone. This is how the boxes will move from the bottom, the curb, if you will, to your doorstep. Probably not going to be droned all the way across Indianapolis. This is probably the better way to use drones. And if you can imagine a scenario where I can go on, say, Amazon.com and put in an order for a t-shirt. 15 minutes later, this vehicle rolls out and drops a box of a t-shirt on my doorstep. Say it's the wrong size t-shirt. I open up the box, put it on, it's the wrong size, put it back in the box, put it on my driveway, click a few things. 15 minutes later, the vehicle comes back out like this one, takes the old box, puts the new one on my driveway with the right size t-shirt. In that world that I just described, you don't need stores. Right? And if you don't think that that's already happening, think about all the stores that have already shut down or closed more than 500 locations in the last 6 months. It's already occurring. Apply that idea to healthcare. What's one of the major reasons why we have hospitals? Well, it's to get access to equipment that's difficult to move and people that know how to use it. What if in the future, when it's time for me to get an MRI, instead of me going to an imaging center or hospital, a vehicle rolls up in front of my house, and I open the door and I look inside and there's no one in it, but there's an MRI machine. Sit down there, push a button. On the left-hand screen comes the world-renowned expert in running MRI machines. On the right-hand side, the world-renowned expert in interpreting them. Hold still, Mr. McDonald. All right, we're all done. Here's what you have. We'll be sending over whatever thing we need to you by autonomous vehicle later today. In that world, we don't need hospitals. Apply that idea to recreational vehicles, something really big here in Indiana, which seems somewhat frivolous. Why would you need an autonomous RV? Well, if I needed to go to Chicago this evening and I didn't have this autonomous vehicle, what a pain in the butt. I have to go home, get a bag, haul it out to my car, drive up to Chicago, maybe drive to the airport, wait in line, fly, run the car, drive downtown, put my bag in the elevator, take it in the room, pain in the butt. What if instead my hotel room came to pick me up tonight and I checked in this evening? Rolled up in front of my house, rolled the bag out of my car, checked in, and it drove me to Chicago. In that world, I definitely don't need Southwest Airlines. I also don't need Hertz. I also don't need Hilton. In fact, at some point we will realize that, in fact, humans are the unsafe part of driving a vehicle. We will realize very soon that for public safety reasons, we need to ban the driving on public freeways, that all traffic accidents are actually preventable. This will probably begin on the late night roads, somewhere in the backwoods of Montana, on maybe I-95 running through Montana, and one of those Cummins diesel engines that will turn into an electric engine and will be automated only. In other words, you won't be allowed to drive a truck on that freeway unless it's an automated mode. It's been 11 and a half years since there's been a single loss of life accident in the commercial airline industry in North America, which is an unprecedented period of time, as in it's never happened before. And one of the main reasons is that's true is because we've largely removed humans from the process of flight. The last flight that I took was from Dulles Airport, just like you in Washington, D.C. It was on a brand new Boeing 787-800. And the pilot quite literally maneuvered the airplane to the end of the runway at Dulles, pushed a button, the plane took off from Dulles, flew itself to Indianapolis, and landed on its own. And so in this regard, in this world, we probably don't need a driver and we probably don't want them. So what's really happening at the heart of this? What's happening at the heart of this is a revolution in data. The whole history of the internet has been essentially an internet of people. The idea was to connect humans to the internet. I have 5 sensors in my body. This iPhone has 12, most of which are designed to make me a smarter endpoint to the internet. But what's happening is, as we expand the smarts of everyday devices that are out there, we're undergoing a shift once again in how it is that computing is centered. The first era of the internet was the mainframe era, where we centralized all of the data and applications on these big machines and connected to them with dumb terminals that had no function other than to give us a gateway to that information. Then we got very enamored from about 1980 to 2000 with shifting all that data and information out to the edge. We called it client server. There were a few things that we never saw, like should you get access to the data, or is it the most current data, or how can I keep you from walking away with that data? And so what we did was we re-centralized everything in the last year back to the cloud and mobile using the new form of mainframe, the cloud, new form of wire, the internet, and the new form of dumb terminal, this cell phone. Although we say we carry around all of human knowledge in our pocket with this cell phone, the truth is this device is actually pretty stupid. It doesn't even keep time well. Like if you fly a long distance airplane flight, the first thing this does is correct its internal clock. It's actually quite stupid and it actually isn't really a very good phone. But now what we have happening is a redistribution of all of this energy to the edge of the internet. We have an explosion in software in everyday devices, which is more like a redistribution like it was in the client-server era. And let me illustrate this with a point. The Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor, which is a device largely conceived of in the late 1970s, has 1.2 million lines of software code in it, which is an unprecedented amount of software for that era in time. Fast forward a few years later, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, device largely conceived of in the early 1990s, has 6.5 million lines of software code in it, which is pretty amazing. But the 2017 Mercedes-Benz S-Class 550 has 20 million lines of software code in it, 14 million of which are in the radio alone, which means it's the most sophisticated device, the most computing that most humans will touch on a daily basis, that has to boot 2 seconds successfully every time you power it up. That explosion of software is causing a shift in how the cloud is being used. Rather than being the source of all data and applications, what's happening and accelerating probably out through the next year of computing, through say 2020, is it becomes a place where selected data goes to be understood and interpreted and correlated between things to be able to come up with entirely new business models and ideas. I'll give you 3 quick examples. Right here in Indianapolis, Rolls-Royce has powered a business model called Power by the Hour, where effectively airlines don't have to own engines anymore. Rolls-Royce will provide them to them as a monthly recurring cost or a monthly recurring revenue fee to Rolls-Royce. It's Rolls-Royce's job to make sure there's 2 working engines on that plane before they roll away. Well, if one of those engines fails, it's on Rolls-Royce, it's not on the airline, which means that the data that comes from the engine becomes super important to the ability to determine profit or loss in this business model. Also highlighting our friends at Cummins Engine. They have a system that we are very proud at Clear Object to help them build and operate, something called Connected Diagnostics, where within 1 minute of a fault code happening on any diesel engine, which can be fairly catastrophic in the diesel engine industry, a message will go to the fleet operator letting them know what that fault code means, how to interpret it, and what to do with it. That means that the data stream that's coming from the engine is almost equally as important as the reliability of the engine itself, because they can pre-roll parts in their internal Cummins care system and intercept the truck at the nearest facility and get it back on the road faster. They're winning a lot of business using that system, and it's a system based on data. The final example is a friend of mine runs a company up in Minneapolis called Robot, clever misspelling of the term robot. What this little device does is there are sensors embedded in about every yard of a field, sort of spikes that go on the ground that measure things like temperature and water level and pH and the like. And what this device does is it goes out whenever there's a problem and it will mitigate that problem on that small little yard square of land. It will interject water into that, maybe zap weeds with hot air, and then maximize the yield that happens on that very small plot of land. So forget about chemicals and forget about GMOs as being the next leap in our efficiency in the agricultural business. It's about data, and it's about automation and automated farming. So these 3 industries, growing things, making things, and moving things, super important, not only to the world, but as Ian pointed out earlier, to Indiana. We're number 10 in the total agricultural output of all 50 states, number 1 in the amount of our GDP that is based in the manufacturing industry, as well as the number of people in Indiana that are employed in that industry, and number 1 in the amount of total goods and services that move over our roads in all 50 states. So these 3 industries are super important to us. But how are we doing in this Internet of Things space, and why are things like the BIC so important? Of those 33 autonomous vehicle programs in America, not one of them is happening in Indiana, not one. We don't get any points, folks, for being really good in the 3 industries that are feeding the state economy. The only points we get is whether or not we're able to take that to the next level. There's 36,420 square miles of land in Indiana, but unless you're within 6 miles east or west of a freeway or a major city, you might as well be on Mars related to its connectivity. There are over 1,000 unfilled coding jobs in Indianapolis alone. If you are a high school student that graduates somewhere outside of the Indianapolis area and you're not going to Purdue or one of our great schools, and you're not going to the military, to be fair, you have a fairly dim outlook on your life, which many of us in the technology business believe is the rootkit of our opioid problem in Indiana. how can we fill these jobs and make these people coders? We have to rethink how our education system works. So we had a lot of challenges in front of us because this idea of IoT can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to happen in Indiana. Any company can do this in any part of the world. Doesn't mean that we're good at it. We get the chance to do it again. So truly what's in front of us is an opportunity to be great in this. And there's many reasons as we can be great in this, and reasons we shouldn't. And things like what the Battery Innovation Center does, and many of you people in this room do, are actually at the cutting edge of this and are going to be the big differentiators to whether or not we're going to be the victors or the victims of the Internet of Things as we get into the next crossroads.